team.
Hey there, this is Malorian, and this is the Orc Tactile team, and we are finally going to talk about Triumph and Trechery. I have had a lot of requests to talk about this, but I just didn't feel right because I hadn't played a game of it yet. Now I have played my first game, I want to play more, and I thought, hey, before I get there, let's get this video out, let's let people know what I think about how this works, and whether it's good or bad. Now, the first thing I really thought when I saw this is I was actually a little bit intimidated by it, because you look at the Triumph and Trechery thing, and it's this massive box. I'm like, wow, I mean, there must be so many rules. This is going to be so hard to learn. I mean, already I have to go through the big rule book to learn how to play different armies and games and stuff like that. Do I really want to read this big book to learn about Triumph and Trechery? But as you saw, that's not the book. The book is a regular size thing. And most of this is just taken up by this little insert, which is just really there to hold these tokens, which I thought were silly at first too, but then once I played, I have a different feeling. And then the cards. And the cards are all about deciding who gets first turn, and all the little treachery things. So really, most of this, it looks like a big box, but most of it's not really too much. Plus, once you get to the actual book, and you look inside, there is very few rules you need to read to do Triumph and Trechery. You go through this, and it's all just fluff, and ways to do different campaigns. And really, when it comes down to it, when you take the pictures out, the rules for the actual Triumph and Trechery are less than 6 pages. So it's really straightforward stuff. And really past that, there can be like 1 more pages if you want to do mercenaries. Because really, the game is all designed to be playing with multiple players. And then you can also do like mercenaries on top of this, where dependent on the size, people basically get allies, or you can save those points to use just to have more tokens to do bribes and stuff like that during the game. Now, the whole premise behind Triumph and Trechery, for those who don't really know about it, is that it's a whole book that kind of tells you how to play multiplayer games. Now, normally if you hear multiplayer games, you're thinking about, oh, it's doubles or something like that, right? It's 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3. You know, maybe you get wonky and it's 2 versus 1, right? Because the one guy has 4,000 points versus 2 armies at 2,000. But the thing is that when you play those games, they don't really feel that different, right? There's still the line in the sand. It's this side versus that side. Sure, that side has more mines to it, or there's a mix of armies or something like that, but still this side versus that side. Typically standard missions, so you don't really get a different feel to it. Some other people, if they're feeling adventurous, make up their own type of missions, and all of a sudden then you can incorporate multiple players. But it's really nice now to have this book that actually kind of shows you how to play this game. Now, really it's set up for anything from, you know, 3 to 5 players type thing, or 3 to 6. And, well, I mean, the only problem with going to 6 is that they only give you so many cards for who goes first. But really, using these rules, you could expand this even further, right? Even though they only give you a breakdown for so many, you can always take this and extrapolate it if you want to do a big game of like 10 people or something like that. But really, the real difference here is that it really, just in the name, like it says, Triumph and Trechery, it's all about making alliances and breaking them and just having a wonky time. So, for those who don't really know how this runs then, you have your multiplayer game. Let's say it's 4 people or whatever, and then all of a sudden in this here as well, it gives you different missions you can play. And I gotta say, for the most part, the actual missions themselves mean very little. The one that I played, you had to go around the board and get tokens, and they gave you an extra 100 points, but honestly, at the end of it, I mean, that was a really small thing, and the points I got from just going out there and killing other units, it was worth a lot more. Now, of course, you can always change that if you wanted to make things more important, but as it comes in a book, from what I've seen so far, it plays less of a role. What plays a much bigger role is the way that you're actually playing and making those alliances and breaking them with the other players. So just to kind of, again, run through how this kind of works, you have your multiple people, you have your multiple zones. When you're deploying, you have to always be a foot away from other players, so that can get a little bit wonky in larger player games, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But after that, you have to draw cards to kind of see who goes first. So you never know going into a turn, am I going to be going first? Am I going to be going second? And that really just forces you to kind of wait until that card turns and builds up that anticipation, because you never know, like, am I going to get it? Will I get this flank charge? Or whether he'll get it first and be able to reform to face you. Or if you're really lucky, you might go last one turn, first the next turn, and get like 2 turns in a row. That's pretty awesome. But that's the first component to it. Past that, they really simplify it by saying in every turn you need to pick an opponent, and that's basically your target for that phase. So you have to do that for when you're doing your charges, when you're doing your shooting, when you're doing your magic, and when you're doing your combat. And you can only damage the target player that you picked. And what that does is 2 things. One, in the magic phase, it really makes it a lot more simplified, because really, when it comes to multiplayer games, when you get to the magic phase, it's like, well, how many power dice should you have? How many dispel dice? How are we going to break these things up? And I've seen lots of different mixes, but really, if you say, you're my target player, that makes it super simple. I roll my winds of magic, and I have this many, you have that many. We go just like normal. But what it also does is, I feel it also will speed up the game, because whereas in a multiplayer game you can get into some really crazy combats where I'm charging here and here and here, and there's counter charges and counter charges and all this stuff. No, it's going to be very simple. If there's an existing combat and you don't pick them that turn as your target, they go apart an inch, and you're only fighting between you and your one target. So it really makes that a lot more simple. Past that, that's really how the game plays. You go around, you do your turns, and in the end you count up the points. Now, another big difference here with the points is that you have these little tokens, so that at the end of every phase, you look at the points you earned, rounded to the 50, and you get coins for this. So what this does is a couple of things. One, at the end of the game turn, depending on who's winning or losing, will determine how many cards you get. We'll talk about the cards in a second. The other thing it does is that you can use these coins for different things. One, you could be using the coins to actually be doing the card, which we're going to talk about in a second. Another one is going to be how you can actually use these tokens to bribe other people. You know, if somebody's set up so that either they could flank you or somebody else, you're like, well, I'll pay you 100 points, basically, to not charge me. And the very cool thing about this is that they don't have to take they don't have to do what they promise to do. It specifically says in the book, you make your wheelings and dealings, you move the points and across the table, and then they get to decide. So some big treachery moments can definitely go down. I mean, if you really need them to, like, man, I can't have them charge, I'll give you all these points to make it so you don't charge, and they do it anyway, it just makes it for these fun moments of treachery. But you got to watch out too, because if you make too many enemies, you're not going to last long in this game, because people can really turn on you quick, and it can be bad news. Now let's get to the cards. There is the series of cards that you have in this game, and really what it does is that in the very beginning you get to start with these cards, and then as the game goes on you get more. So if they don't pick you as the target for that phase, you roll a dice, and on a 6 you get another one. At the end of the turn, the winner gets 1, the loser gets 3, everybody else gets 2, and if you have more than 5, you have to discard down to 5. Now, these cards have a wide range of things that they do, ranging from making it so that you're +1 strength in a combat to forcing somebody else to change their target. So, oh, you want to charge me? No, you have to pick a new target. You have to go against somebody else. It's all these different things you can do that really add this really unique flavor to a Triumph and Trechery game. Now, past this, I was talking about some of the things where it's really big about alliances. So that's really the game and how it works. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the strategy behind it, and what you probably want to do if you want to do well at Triumph and Treachery. Now, the first thing you want to do is build an aggressive army. You can't go into this with something like Wood Elves and go plink, 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 because if you go in there and just damage a bunch of units, somebody else is going to finish off those, get all the points, and you're kind of left with nothing. You want to be the guy that finishes. You're going to get in there and get those points. For every round of combat you win, you get 50 points. So maybe there could be something to go with having a unit that gets in there and wins but doesn't break, just so you can slowly get lots of points and then later in the game break and get those points. But that seems a little bit more risky. It's better to go with things like bring out your war machines, kill those big point monsters, take your Savage Orc Biggins so you can get in there, win those combats, and destroy them, right? Maybe you want to go with faster units so that when they break, you can actually catch them and get those points. Because if you don't, somebody else will, right? Normally, if I'm playing a game of Orcs and Goblins, I can charge with my Biggins, I can break you, and if I don't catch you, oh, whatever, I'll just charge you again. Well, that's not how it's going to work here. I'm going to charge you, I'm going to break you, and then I'll get 50 points for winning combat, and somebody else will get the unit after. So you really have to build an army that finishes. With that too, you definitely, there's some luck involved with the way that goes for deployment, because you want to be on the corners, right? You don't want to be stuck in the middle, and as well because of the way it goes, where when you deploy, you have to be a foot away, and we have all these players. I played my game with some really big hordes, and if I wasn't one of the first people to deploy, I just wouldn't get to deploy them. They'd have to start in reserve, and that'd be a real issue. But with that, you're almost thinking too that maybe you have to think about the size of your army in relation to how it's going to be on the board. Let's see, I would say like 3 hordes was probably too much. 2 you can get away with. What are you going to do without those points going to another big horde? You know, you can be using those for, I wouldn't say chaff, you know, chaff and redirectors. It can be kind of nice, but the whole board is going to be so wonky, playing like double fleas and stuff won't really be as beneficial here. I would say put those points into either the war machines if you don't have those already, or put them into characters so again you can make your units stronger, make sure you win combat, and make sure you can finish them in one go. Now, past that as well, in the first few turns of the Triumph and Treachery, you want to make sure that you try and work this ally system out early. Find someone you're going to ally with, because the last thing you want to do is to be fighting on multiple fronts. If you can, it'd be awesome to be focusing on one side, and again, focus, get those points. As well, I mean, you don't want to be the enemy. You don't want to be mocking other people and saying like, oh, I'm going to crush all of you. I mean, some banter is fun, but if everybody turns on you, it really is a big deal, right? It's not like when it's like the 2 versus 2 where you mock them and it's still 2 versus 2. If it's a 5-player game and you mock the other people, you know, it could be 8,000 points versus 2,000, and you just can't survive that, right? You might have your scroll to stop one magic phase, but you're going through 5 magic phases. Well, 4 enemy ones, right? So it really can hurt you. At the same time, you can get some huge points from breaking alliances. So you almost want to have an alliance so you can break the alliance, because all of a sudden they can be showing off their flank, or they just won't be going after your war machines or something like that, the key models you have, which means you can use those to get more points, right? Maybe even from them. So those are some big things you want to be looking at. When it comes to the cards, you will probably get to the point where you're getting a lot of cards, you're not using them all the time. You probably want to save those again for key moments, which is going to affect points. It's fun to play the cards. It's like, oh, I screw you over and I'll screw you over. But you really want to save the powerful ones for when you're about to go for a key combat or something like that where you need to get these points, or if somebody's going to charge you to, you know, place something there to stop their shooting, stop their combat, whatever you need to do, but keep those points in mind. And with that, again, it doesn't matter what you lose. It only matters what you gain. I mean, at the end of the game, I can be completely tabled, but if I have that big stack of tokens from killing lots of stuff, I'm going to be the winner. Sure, I won't have stuff on the table to get those scenarios, but like I said, it's more important to actually go and make sure you get those points, especially the more players there are. If it was fewer players, the scenario can be a bigger deal because then you'd expect one player to control more of the board. But when there's multiple people, there's going to be so many combats going on that you really can't really expect to be spreading out too wide unless you get lucky and you get really dominant. But again, this game almost self-corrects for this because if one player gets too strong, the other players turn against him, and it really kind of helps get this balance going on. Now, with this, I would also like to say that if you are a real strategic person and you're looking to prove that you're better than all your buddies, this is not the game for you. There is definitely a way to play this game smart and to do very well at it by playing smart. However, it's almost like playing Orcs and Goblins where you can have a perfect plan and animosity just says no. You can go and you can be playing a perfect game, but if the people decide to turn on you and play the right cards against you, you're just kind of screwed. So it's best just to go into this game saying, you know what, this is going to be a great game with a good handful of my buddies, and we're just going to have a blast. Go in there. I mean, don't just take stupid stuff. Take stuff that's going to do well at the game, but don't go into the game feeling like you're going to, it's the end of the world if you lose. I mean, of course, you're going to the game, you don't want to win, but realize that winning means that you probably got lucky or you were more of a jerk as opposed to you being a brilliant general, right? So keep that in mind. There was some talk about how you could actually make a tournament out of this, where you could maybe play multiple games, and either it's a summation of points over multiple games, or it's a thing where the top players could move on and go to those tables as well. But again, you're kind of forcing it to be a competitive format with something that's more better just for playing for fun. So I think it's better just to do that. Now, in the end, what are my overall thoughts of Triumph and Trechery? It is a fantastic game. I have watched several of them on YouTube, and people are always having a blast. When I got to do my game, it was fantastic, lots and lots of fun, and I just can't wait to do more of them. It's not a thing where I would say I want to do this all the time, but definitely something to mix in now and then, just like the Sieges. It just really changes things, but as opposed to a Siege game where it's like, oh, okay, it's almost like a different scenario that you're playing that's nice and unique. This one is just really for you and your buddies to pull out some beers and have a lot of fun. So there you go, Triumph and Trechery. Expect to see more of it on my channel, and either way, thanks for watching. Bye.